I recognize the member for Tobago West.
Thank you. The mic isn't. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I am thankful for the opportunity to contribute to this motion. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I was really excited to show up here today, and I was looking forward to what the opposition was going to bring. So I kept checking the papers. I was out of the country in the month of December, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So I said it must have been something I would have missed. So I came and I kept looking for what is it they're about to say? What is the opposition about to say? Do they have a bomb to drop? And I must say I am very, very, very disappointed. As I sat here and I listened to the member for Siparia, I am very, very disappointed. I want to respond to what the last member would have spoken about, because her position when she started her contribution, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it was incorrect, and they tried to twist the facts. Mr. Speaker, we all, as members of cabinet, as members of this government, you may have different opinions, but then you caucus, you get the necessary advice and so on, and then we agree on what we do in going forward. So to say Member Foster Cummings having a different opinion and we didn't value his opinion, Mr. Deputy Speaker, this whole COVID situation is new to all of us, all over the world, and different people have different opinions. For instance, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I felt that because I live alone, when I return on a flight, I could stay home and quarantine for the whole 14 days. I felt like I could do that, Mr. Deputy Speaker. But one thing that I respect about this government is that we continue to be advised by the technical gurus, the people in the health department, the CMO and so on. And it's not based on what we want to do personally. It is not a political decision. And that is why we have been doing better than other countries, because we do what we have to do based on the scientific direction of those who know better than we do. So yes, I live alone. I want to quarantine at home for 14 days by myself, but that is not the directive. That is not the advice of those who know better than we do, and we would abide by that, despite what any member inside or out. If we took advice from them, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the bars would be open, the borders would be open, all that kind of nonsense, Mr. Deputy Speaker, but we are taking advice and instruction and direction from the CMO and his team and those who know best. And anyone among us who have a different opinion, you can have a different opinion. But what the CMO says and what we are directed to do by those who know better than we do, that's what we do as a government, and that is what it is to be responsible. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I must say, I am pleased to stand here to support Ms. MP Stuart Young, the MP for Port of Spain North. The member Siparia couldn't convince herself, she couldn't convince her followers, and couldn't convince anybody in this parliament that he was inadequate or unfit for the job. A matter of fact, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I think that this motion today is a fraud. This motion is a sham, Mr. Deputy Speaker. This motion is an SOS. It is a cry for attention and relevance of those opposite. The only inadequacy that was shown up today is that of the member for Siparia and all her followers. This is an embarrassment. I never believed I would stand in this parliament any day, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and miss Ramona Ramdial. The experienced people in the UNC are looking on with shame, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Because this is not about MP Stuart Young's performance of his duties, him honoring his oath. This is about them scoring cheap political point for political expediency, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I've had the opportunity of working with MP Young since the days of opposition. He was a temporary senator, and I remember looking forward to the days that he would be there because he was always well-researched, always very passionate. And though he came from a business and from the legal fraternity, Mr. Deputy Speaker, he was always about putting the country first, and he connected so well with the common man. So he's somebody that I look up to, and I think he's a distinguished son of the soil that is most suited for this position. I am pleased to serve in a cabinet alongside him. He is pragmatic, he is reasonable, he looks out for the younger members of the cabinet and of the government, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I am impressed by the work he's doing in St. Anne's West, Port of Spain North, the work in his constituency, the work that he's doing, giving tablets and laptops to his constituents and working with the schools and the young people, partnering with the private sector like Digicel to provide technical opportunities and so on to the community, homework centers, you name it, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And he does so while being an outstanding and very helpful, very resourceful member of our cabinet as chairman of the FNGP committee, member of the National Security Council, and member of several joint select committees, Mr. Deputy Speaker. He has made stellar contribution, and he has always chosen the best interests of the people of Trinidad and Tobago over the party and over his personal interests, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I looked as to why would the opposition bring a motion of no confidence? Because this is a very serious motion. When you lose confidence in a minister or in a government, that means you want them to go. But you have to have sound reason, and I tried to look at the yardstick as to what is it that the opposition is looking for, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, that being said, the role of the Minister of National Security is a very important one, and he must be able to strike a good balance, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and be able to properly protect the citizens of this country over anything else, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, so as I look for the yardstick, what could the UNC be looking for? What could the former Prime Minister and former head of the National Security Council be looking for? And I said to myself, I went back to her term of office to look for the yardstick. What is it that she's expecting from this government, from this member of Port of Spain, North St. Anne's East? And I wonder, is this the same former head of National Security Council and former Prime Minister who should know better that had 5 different ministers of national security? The same former head of the National Security Council that denied Tobago fire station in Shervan, no, police station in Shervan, police station in Roxborough, fire station in Roxborough also, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Those items were delivered by the Honourable Stuart Young in his capacity as Member for National Security. Mr. Deputy Speaker, is this the same former head of National Security that utilized $6 million of taxpayers' dollars to move a fire truck? It's the same former member of National Security Council where Mr. Jack Iwatsky and Dwayne Gibbs left with $2.4 million ex gratia payment and told that former government that it was not ready, it wasn't serious? Is this the same former head of National Security Council that dismissed and sent home the experienced and qualified members of the SSA to promote a telephone operator to being director of the SAC? Is this the yardstick that we are being measured by, Mr. Deputy Speaker? Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I could remember the same former head of National Security Council would have sat as head of government, head of the National Security Council, where the Minister of National Security of that day, Mr. Jack Warner, would have banned the circulation or the publication of national security details and information from the population. That's the same head of National Security Council and former Prime Minister under her watch that gave us an SOE and locked up over 100 young men and then had to let go every single one of them. This is the same opposition that fails to support government's legislation and efforts that were meant to or geared to safeguard our people, and the same opposition that circulate untruths and then they ask the questions after. I have been a recent victim, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I came home to all this blitz and drama in the newspaper ran by the opposition about me getting the okay to travel. I applied, got my necessary approval, went there, came back, did my 14 days quarantine, but yet you have an opposition senator on social media egging on Ian Allen and egging on the rest of them, Mr. Deputy Speaker, stating that I'm out and about and in quarantine, and they know very well that it is and should be in quarantine. They know very well that it's not true because it's the same UNC, the same members opposite, who the day after I returned said that I was given special treatment and allowed to come off the aircraft first. Well, of course, if you're sitting in row one and we're exiting the airplane one by one, I would get off the aircraft first. So this is their big mark to bust, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And I traveled on the same flight on December 16th with MP for Komoto Manzilila, Mr. Rai Ragbir. And no questions about that, Mr. Deputy Speaker. A matter of fact, let me share with you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, when I got off the plane, because when I travel, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I don't utilize protocol if I'm going on my personal business. When I got off the plane, protocol in the USA was waiting for member of the opposition, Mr. Rai Ragbir. So due to his request, I got special treatment based on Mr. Rai Ragbir, who went on personal business also, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And they forgot to mention that, Mr. Deputy Speaker. But I wouldn't stay any longer on that point. Mr. Deputy Speaker, our business as a government is to protect all nationals, especially amidst this whole COVID-19 situation. Their plan as an opposition team when they were planning to get back in government or hoping to get back in government, their biggest hit for national security policy was to give us a dome, to put Trinidad under a dome to protect them from COVID. That was their national security policy. That cannot be the yardstick that my dear colleague
I'll try to get the relevance for a little while now, and it's very difficult. Very difficult.
On the point, on the point that was now made?
Well, yes, this has nothing to do with
that was your national security policy. That was your national security policy. Mr. Deputy
Hold
Speaker.
on. 1 second. Overruled.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this is an opposition, members opposite, who told us, who cancelled the OPVs under their watch, Madam Mr. Deputy Speaker, telling us that this country is not at war out in the seas. The war is on land and in the streets. So therefore they cancelled the OPVs, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And to make matters worse, I heard a member for Princestown when he spoke about they ordered the Damon vessels during their watch from 2010 to 2015. Mr. Deputy Speaker, they secured those vessels after their time was up because election was due in May and those vessels were secured in June. So from 2010 to 2015, our borders were naked and didn't have those Damon vessels that they boast about that they ordered during their time. It was 1 month after their time was up and 3 months before election, and they procured that vessel or those vessels without having any type of arrangement for financing it. It is our government that had to come in place and pay for those vessels, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And it's the procurement of those vessels, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that have them now in trouble because the Dutch law enforcement authorities are undertaking a criminal investigation and a forensic probe for those opposite the People's Partnership, or should I say the UNC, for their acquisition of the Daman vessels, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I am pleased that this government had seen it fit to place priority on providing proper infrastructure and proper equipment for the Coast Guard. So we have reached out to the Australian government, and we are having built 2 Cape-class vessels, patrol boats for the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard. And this is a case where the experts from the Coast Guard had the opportunity to go out to Australia for 1 week and look at what was being done, ensure that it was up to standard, and to ensure that it's fit for seas, Mr. Deputy Speaker. They'll tell us that the former head of National Security Council and former Prime Minister, the mover of this motion, went to China and got a vessel. It was a case of whim, where she said, oh, I want one. There was no Coast Guard expert there to say this is fit for us or not fit for us. For all you know, it was a fishing boat, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And now this country, this Minister of National Security, Mr. Stuart Young, the MP Stuart Young, has now done the work to get us the type of vessels that we so deserve. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we, the people of Tobago, we say special thanks to MP Stuart Young for giving us that security and that assurance that we are going to have vessels protecting Tobago, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I'm thankful for the work that he has done, working along with the Prime Minister and going above and beyond the call of duty to ensure that we have 2 first-class vessels being ordered from INCAT and from Austal to service the Trinidad and to service between Trinidad and Tobago for sea transportation. We were pleased just last week when the APT James came sailing into Tobago. We remember the confusion and how much they made so much fun, and they were excited when things were going wrong, Mr. Deputy Speaker. But today, because of our Honourable Stuart Young, MP for Port of Spain South, we are in a different position, and the people of Tobago are well pleased. We are also very well pleased for the work that he has done in giving us for the first time our child protection unit in the police, and that unit helps to treat matters relating to children in a very special way, ensuring that those issues get the proper priority and the handling that is needed for children, and to engage stakeholders. They go out to the schools throughout Tobago. They speak to the parents and the PTA. They help principals and the different safety hours officers. We thank Honourable Stuart Young for the work that he has done and continues to do. We thank Honourable Stuart Young for working with our Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister to ensure that we have the Children's Authority Unit here in Tobago for the very first time, and for working with the Attorney General. We thank MP Stuart Young for bringing us the family court to Tobago. And the list goes on and on and on. In my capacity as Member of Parliament, in my capacity as Minister for Sport and Community Development, we have the mediation unit, and it is now working with the Ministry of National Security in utilizing mediation to help with crime in the communities. And our project here in Trinidad and Tobago that was pioneered by MP Stuart Young is the project that is being used as the template for the entire Caribbean region. Last year, we had a training session and a seminar to educate the rest of the ministries and the governments throughout the Caribbean. That's the work, Mr. Deputy Speaker, of my colleague, with whom I am very well pleased, the Honourable Stuart Young. So as we await the Buku Reef, which will make its way into
Member, you have
Tobago.
2 more minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I want to say thank you on behalf of the people of Tobago and the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. MP Stuart Young Member of Parliament for Port of Spain South, has come to lead national security at a time when we are grappling with crime, the whole Venezuelan situation, but the international community gave him and gave our government recognition for how we would have handled the Venezuelan situation. And it is the same way the international community had ranked us as #1 for how we're handling the COVID situation. Sometimes, Mr. Deputy Speaker, as we try to strike that good balance in serving all the people and protecting the people that we took the oath to serve, you make friends and you lose some. But at the end of the day, we are doing what is in the best interest for the people of this nation, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And I want to thank Honorable Stuart Young for his courage, for his confidence, for standing in the gap for the people of Trinidad and Tobago and doing what he is supposed to do. And if you don't thank us now, you're going to thank us later. But I'm thankful for the work that he is doing, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and we look forward to many, many, many more years of your intelligent and inspiring leadership. And we are happy to stand here with you and for you. I thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
I recognize the member for St. Augustine.